let's go on to the next game. Okay, like I said, I've got different themes for this show. And so we've started off with a 2-bishop in the endgame. And now we're going to do 3 games with Dreams of Frederico the F-pawn. And in 2 of the games, we're going to see that there's weakness, there's a critical weakness with F4. And in one game, I think White needed the weakness of F4, and I'm going to get to that in a little bit. Actually, I'm going to start with this game with Nicholas, and I'm going to come back to Marty. So, Nicholas has been playing this Slav stuff, totally fine. And Nicholas likes E4. It's definitely like the most common move in the database. I'm not really a complete friend of E4. It's totally a move, of course. I guess B3 is a nice move too, just holding the tension. But E4, snip. You could take DC and play E5 as well. Snip. And now a move that I don't like, H6. So let me share something that comes up in another game as well later, and that is that when Black talks about this move, you know, Nicholas is talking about, oh, I was worried about Bishop H7, and that kind of thing, maybe worried about Bishop G5. He talks about weakening the king side. That's all true. It's all true. But the critical problem with H6 is the loss of time. That's the critical problem. And we're going to see that again and again, and that's the issue here for a lot of players, is the loss of time. And if there's anything, I'll look at anybody's game, but if you lose a tempo on my show, I want to tell you that hurts me more than anything. If you have a tactical error, I don't care. If you have a positional understanding, I don't care. But if you lose a tempo on this show, I just want to say it's not the end of the world, but it hurts me. If you want to hurt me, then lose the tempo. All right. So many other moves. Queen C7 comes to mind. Knight F6 comes to mind. C5 is what Nicholas wrote. Okay. Now, White doesn't necessarily take advantage of this whole business here either. And Bishop E3 seems suspect to me. Especially because at some point, Black might decide to play F5, F4. Knight F6, and we kind of bounce around a little bit. I don't like Rook E8. Really, we're wasting more time. Of course, you should play Bishop B7. And now Knight E5. And here's the funny thing about the White position. And I've been here before. As White, you got this position, and you know, maybe you were threatening to take on H6. I'm a little skeptical, but maybe you were, right? And that was why Rook E8 happened. Actually, let's go through the notes that Nicholas wrote. So this was his terror. And now we're saying it's all over. Interesting. That might be true. That might be true. With Knight G5, and that's it. Do I give him a pass on Rook E8? It just feels like, oh, I don't want to give him a pass. Here's a simple move, Nicholas. Before you lose a tempo, why don't you just play that, you know? Okay. So, anyways, Rook E8. The advantage of Rook E8 is it makes White lose his mind a little bit. And Knight E5 is an interesting move because it's going to really commit White to playing F4. And one of the things, I'm going to talk about this F4 in a couple different positions. One of the things about this F4 is it's going to dramatically weaken the White king, and it's going to dramatically weaken the E4 square. Notice too, a problem that White has is like, what is this bishop actually doing? And is it loose? Like later, is it going to be the subject of a tactical problems, like I'm just sitting in the way of stuff? And of course, when they play Bishop C2, the dream is to do some kind of Queen D3 thing. So I don't think Knight E5 itself was bad, but we're going to see that it's going to get complicated. So bishop b7, f4. Okay. It weakens a lot of squares. Absolutely. Nicholas writes f3. That definitely would be better, but it's pretty weird to put your knight on e5 and then play e3, f3, right? So f4, and here I thought black's, just playing natural moves, and it's white who's building himself a hole. That white had an interesting opportunity here that I don't even know if it's any good, but it would have been interesting. There's a lot of old-time GM games where black is about to play c5. Once he plays c5, his position is totally open and free. So the interesting move, I think, for white is to say, well, what about that? Now, a lot of times in these positions, it's the c5 pawn you're gambiting. But I thought this was an interesting gambit because if you want to take this thing, you're going to give me your dark square bishop. And do I know what's happening in this position? Absolutely not. But I think it's at least dangerous for black because the bishop on b7 is now dead. And, we've got the f file. We've got the bishops. It feels like compensation to me. Okay. So, in the game, white played h3. Well, at least you're not doing it, Nicholas. He's doing it. He plays h3. And what you can feel with white here is that he's lost his mind. And he doesn't know what to do. Okay, rook a d8. Now later, Nicholas is angry at himself because he wants the e-rook on d8. But honestly, it feels okay to me. Queen e2, another move. He's lost his mind. He doesn't know. He's put his knight on e5 and then doesn't have an idea of what to do next. And I think that's why I mentioned the c5 idea, because that at least is a powerful idea where white's doing something. And the worst thing you can do, once you've committed to this very dynamic knight on e5, which has weaknesses for white, is you waste some time. And you kind of just sit and you don't do anything. And black, of course, it's not hard to find rook a d8. c5 would have been fine too. c5, rook a d8. And now, it's kind of interesting here. A lot of times, when people make an evaluation, I don't know if it's a computer evaluation or it's just theirs. But my sense here was that Nicholas felt like maybe it was kind of an equalish position. And I just can't agree. I feel like this is a classic situation where white has made a key weakness. He has less pawns in front of his king, and one of those pawns is even way up on f4. And this bishop, amazing. This bishop not knowing what it's doing. Kind of hitting at air. And, I think in a lot of players' intuitions, they see the bishop on c2 and say, well, I've got the initiative, I'm attacking there. But if you don't have the initiative, as white doesn't here, well, no, it's doing nothing. So I think Nicholas gave a variation with c takes here, bishop takes, and then rook c8, which I don't get, and leading to equality. And I just want to put for myself, bishop c5 looks fantastic, looks fantastic. Long term, we are just going, well, I don't know. I don't know how white survives this long term because the king is a disaster. And the bishop on b7, monster. Okay. One thing I guess I wanted to do this with the weaknesses is I had a formative game years ago. I was trying to become a GM and maybe a mildly similar position. And I was white against Julio Becerra, who's a great GM, lives in Miami now. He lived in Miami forever. I think now he's got a family, doesn't play as much anymore. Anyways, I played some move like f4, partly out of frustration. Like, I don't like, as in a sense of like, I don't know what to do in the position. I'm going to play f4. And after the game, you rightly said, yeah, well, now the game's shifted. Now the game's shifted. Now I've got like some really dark long-term things to do against you after this f4 is committed. And If you're going to do f4, you need to follow it up with activity and not just sit around like this guy's doing. And rook c8, don't just take on d4 and play bishop c5. You're doing great. White's just sitting around. Knight e4, well, you take on d4 or put the other rook on d8, right? I don't really understand White's play. They kind of go around, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to highlight this game. Horrendo move. You can't play chess like that. And you can kind of get inside his mind too. He's like, oh no, the black queen's gonna get here. Well, now, my friend, we got a holy moly on our hands, right? Okay, now he gives us complete control of the light squares, and I'm going to call this one lost. All right. Nice finish here from Nicholas. Trade off the bishop finally. We own the airwaves. Check the miserable king, and this is what you get when you weaken your position.